Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out? And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope Jake Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
In a moment that shocked audiences across political and entertainment spheres, George Clooney found himself at the center of an unexpected firestorm after voicing controversial remarks aimed at conservative media figures. The actor, known for his polished Hollywood presence and liberal activism, made a bold appearance during a nationally televised event, where he openly criticized what he labeled as dangerous misinformation from right-wing commentators. But what Clooney didn't expect was the ferocious clapback from Fox News' Greg Gutfeld and co-host Kat Timpf, who wasted no time dismantling his claims with surgical precision and a healthy dose of sarcasm.
I think, this Johnny-come-lately, I was raised to be honest, is a bunch of BS. All right. Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America and the Democrat Party, certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in American history.
Gutfeld opened his response with a smirk, calling Clooney's performance Oscar-worthy if the category was detached elitism. Kelly, standing by Gutfeld's side, added fuel to the fire, pointing out the irony in Clooney's attacks. For someone who made millions pretending to be other people, you'd think he'd be better at pretending to understand America. The audience burst into laughter, stunned by the unapologetic takedown. What followed was an extended segment where Gutfeld and Kelly fact-checked Clooney's speech live on air, exposing glaring contradictions in his narrative. They highlighted his support for causes he seemingly misunderstands, his alignment with politicians facing credibility issues, and his frequent use of generalizations that alienate large swaths of the public. Every jab landed hard. The crowd in the studio and viewers at home were visibly caught off guard by the bluntness of it all. Rather than fade quietly, this clash signaled the start of something bigger, a cultural line drawn in the sand between Hollywood celebrity and conservative media power. And while Clooney may have intended to make a statement, Gutfeld and Kelly made it clear he might have just embarrassed himself in the process.
I remember Clooney's the same guy who held a star-studded fundraiser for Joe weeks before he dropped out and only called for him to quit after his disastrous debate. Clooney ignored concerns over Biden's age for years, only to magically come to the conclusion that he was demented when America finally saw what Clooney had been hiding. That's the problem with Dems. They're obedient shills for awful people, then pretend otherwise once voters see that they're full. But remember, we were pointing out Joe's dementia before it was cool. We knew Biden was the worst president ever, which probably means Jimmy Carter died a happy man.
Gutfeld compared Clooney's address to a goldfish attempting to educate a cat about the water cycle. To him, it wasn't bold political insight. It was bloated rhetoric dressed in designer suits. The statements, packed with luxurious phrasing, but light on substance, felt more like a theatrical awards speech than an informed take on governance. With scathing humor, Gutfeld pointed to the contradictions. A man traveling the globe via private jet delivering climate warnings, or speaking about middle-class struggles while managing a vineyard in Lake Como, seemed detached from lived experience. For Gutfeld, this wasn't just hypocrisy, it was an art form. He painted Clooney as the embodiment of the Malibu Messiah complex, where celebrity applause is misread as expertise. No policy depth required, just posture, privilege, and polished delivery. According to Gutfeld's breakdown, this was less about civic duty and more about performance, where moisturizers replaced meaningful research and celebrity became the stand-in for informed leadership.
On cue.
Party, I bet there's one person in particular he thinks is spectacular.
There's one person in particular I think is spectacular. There are a few who I think is levitating above that is Wes Moore. I like him a lot. I think he could be someone we could all join in behind. We have to find somebody rather soon. It's our job now to put together a proper team to stand up, because we're right now polling very poorly.
I love that. Levitating above, as opposed to sinking to the bottom, like his last movie.
She started with a precise dissection of Clooney's recent behavior, a case study in elite virtue signaling. Her critique focused on the disconnect between fame-based influence and real-world governance, highlighting the contrast between theatrical skill sets and policy depth with sharp and composed delivery. Megyn Kelly approached Clooney's contradictions with the precision of a scientist, observing a rare, illogical specimen. Here was a figure delivering speeches about climate responsibility while flying in fuel-hungry private jets and collecting motorized luxury vehicles priced higher than most family homes. A champion of equality, yet residing in a fortified mansion resembling a palace in both scale and security. She didn't just point out the contradictions, she illuminated them like stage lights cutting through fog. In Kelly's analysis, Clooney wasn't missing the point. He had become the point itself, a living symbol of the disconnect between elite narratives and everyday reality. It wasn't the novelty of his views that drew critique, but how they were presented. Recycled ideologies wrapped in celebrity sheen, served with a helping of self-importance. Kelly's core argument struck deeper than simple hypocrisy. She questioned the very idea that fame should carry intellectual authority, as if a familiar face automatically equates to a policy blueprint.
So she and George get together and they start navel-gazing on stage about themselves, of course, and their vaunted profession and how bad, how just terrible the media is, and had the following exchange.
What we do in this is we talk about the responsibility of journalists to hold truth to power, right? That's our goal. Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing that, and we don't tell people what to think when we show that montage at the end, for instance.
Kelly posed a serious question to media institutions. Why give Clooney a platform to address democracy as though he's penned legislative doctrine between espresso breaks? Her most impactful moment wasn't fiery rhetoric, but calm resistance to spectacle. While others projected sophistication onto Clooney's polished presence, Kelly remained grounded, dissecting the illusion with sharp clarity. She didn't engage in personal attacks. She dismantled the construct of Clooney as a political solution. This collective belief that charisma, camera presence, and cinematic accolades are somehow interchangeable with qualified leadership received a sobering and necessary challenge. And here's the standout moment. The public responded like it was watching a summer blockbuster. Gutfeld's sharp one-liners went viral instantly. Memes surfaced across platforms, photoshopping Clooney onto motivational posters with captions like "Speak less, flex less." Social media transformed into a digital arena filled with divided responses. Supporters clutched espresso cups, while critics came armed with facts and grounded skepticism. Meanwhile, Kelly's dissection didn't just trend, it resonated. Her words echoed across shows willing to question celebrity-driven narratives. These weren't mere opinions. They were clarifying observations that made viewers pause and think, triggering reactions like, "Finally, someone said it." Kelly didn't come in swinging wildly. She arrived composed, with the deliberate pace of a professional ready to cut through confusion.
But in this new world of common sense, what does he align with? He might have way more in common with Trump than he is with the progressives. The question is, does he have the bravery to say that? I have no idea where he stands on the border, sanctuary cities, or trans extremism. How does he feel about the fires in LA? Is he happy with how it was handled by Mayor What's-Her-Face and Governor who's his name?
From there, Kelly went deeper. She addressed Clooney's comments on media narratives, threats to democratic discourse, and his assertion that dissenting voices, particularly from conservatives, represent danger. What followed was a firm, evidence-backed response, dismantling that narrative layer by layer until the platform Clooney stood on seemed less like a podium and more like a pedestal, cracking under its own weight.
Julia Roberts, who outed herself not only as a leftist, which we knew, but as somebody who, and by the way, she's also a husband stealer. She stole the husband that she has right now in a reported affair. So, okay, maybe don't be the voice of the ad in which we talk about women betraying their husbands, because in the leftist view, marriages are not about honesty and talking about one's differences and agreeing to disagree on certain dicey issues, but they're about lying. And they believe this so strongly, you put it in an ad. And her pal, George Clooney, who did something similar for another ad, same. You got Joe Biden out. How'd it work out for you? How'd that go? Maybe you should have said something a little early.
Kelly came equipped with evidence. She cited polls showing public trust in mainstream media declining rapidly, faster than recent Hollywood box office returns. She clarified that suppressing opposing viewpoints isn't democracy. It's simply an echo chamber draped in polished lighting and elite branding. Then came the unmistakable expression, the one that silently questions the logic behind ill-prepared arguments delivered with overconfidence.
I think, this Johnny come lately, I was raised to be honest, is a bunch of BS. All right. Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America and the Democrat Party, certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in American history.
It was the kind of moment where someone enters a serious debate armed with enthusiasm, but lacking substance. The comparison? Imagine someone trying to explain complex policy using the insights of a movie script, engaging but lacking weight. This was the atmosphere as Clooney's views on global affairs unfolded under scrutiny. Then came the pivotal turn. Kelly's focus shifted to inconsistencies. She highlighted the glaring contradiction of someone promoting climate action while frequently traveling by private jet, enough to earn carbon offsets and luxury traveler status. And when addressing unity, she noted how the message only seemed to apply to those aligned ideologically. Anyone outside a narrow ideological band, conservatives, libertarians, or blue-collar workers, was consistently left out of that vision.
Here he is going on, this is to 60 last night, about, you mentioned his op-ed in the New York Times on Joe Biden, and why he did it. Such a selfless, brave act, Ben. Here he was.
I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that.
Oh, wow.
And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
That fundraiser where he saw Biden almost falling off the stage, where Obama came out to grab him, was June 15th. The debate was June 27th. It wasn't until July 10th, almost a month after he attended the fundraiser with him, that George Clooney finally wrote that op-ed after it became clear that Joe Biden wasn't stepping down.
She likened the display to Hollywood's rising habit of staging revolutions from luxury locations, grand declarations made safely from balconies, not battle lines. They're not risking anything, she noted. They're not in the streets. They're posting from yachts and lecturing during televised awards while orchestras cue them off stage for going over time. By the conclusion, the spectacle shifted. No shouting, no rage, just a steady dismantling through clear reasoning and biting observation. Kelly opened the door to reality and allowed the illusion to collapse under its own contradictions. It wasn't loud. It was deliberate, surgical, and unignorable. Somewhere, within the silence of a gated villa and polished press statements, that impact likely echoed. A polished narrative unraveled by two sharp voices uninterested in showbiz approval. What began as a political pitch now stands as a cautionary lesson for those who believe applause equals insight. Because at the end of the day, what remains is this: a once revered image now reduced to commentary fodder, adrift in self-importance, guided only by the fading glow of curated relevance. It was like attempting chess against one opponent with a sledgehammer and another armed with a legal brief, and still believing the odds were in your favor. But this moment wasn't just about George Clooney. This was a broader cultural critique, a spotlight on the creeping illusion that fame automatically confers credibility. It's about a celebrity system convinced that applause on screen validates ideas off screen, and that box office numbers are equivalent to wisdom. Greg Gutfeld and Kelly didn't merely critique one public figure, they dismantled a recurring performance across Hollywood. The ritual of award shows where affluent entertainers congratulate themselves for simulating hardship was squarely in their sights. Clooney stepped into what he likely thought would be respectful dialogue. Instead, he walked into an analytical buzzsaw. Gutfeld shredded the glamour, Kelly exposed the myth, and what remained was a man whose political ideas carried less weight than expected. Behind the curtain wasn't a sage leader. It was a citizen with an opinion, one no more informed than that of a well-read Uber driver, and possibly with less direct exposure to everyday challenges. The result sent a powerful message. The public is fatigued, not just by monologues from actors, but by the assumption that privilege makes them experts. Clooney unintentionally became the symbol of cultural tone deafness, the luxury, the lectures, the limousine idealism.
Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out? And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope Jake Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
If you appreciated this breakdown, make sure to like this video, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sharp takes and cultural deep dives.